We're on Tessamud Bays, uh, two-thirds of the way down at the two dots. It's 9B2, the top of the second column. So you're allowed to, the Mishnah said, Beis Shamai says you're not allowed to move the ladder from a dovecote to a different one, but you can tilt it from different openings within the same dovecote. So Alma Gabi Simchas YT Beis Shamai l'chumra Beis Hillel l'kula. So it seems in regard to Simchas YT, eating meat on Yantif, now there is a bit of a discussion that the Simcha of, Simcha on Yantif is really from eating the meat of the Karbanos. Now that we don't have Karbanos, the Rambam still says it's meat, so you should have meat. It seems that it's beef, and these are not quite beef. These are little birds, so it doesn't seem to be full simcha. But the point is that even if it's not okay, even if it's not literally a kiyum of the mitzvah of Simchas Yantif, but still having the fresh, good food on Yantif is still uh, a good thing. So Alma Gabi Simchas Yantif Beis Shamai l'chumra Beis Hillel l'kula. It seems that Beis Shamai is strict, meaning he limits how much you're able to move the ladder to get the birds that you want, and Beis Hillel is more lenient. No, that in order that you could have Simchas Yantif, you're able to move the ladder a little bit more. Or minhi, but I'll ask you a contradiction from our Mishnah, from the very first Mishnah Beitza. Hashochet chayav ha'of b'yom tov. If you shecht a wild animal or a bird on Yom Tov. No, the when you shecht a wild animal or a bird, you need to cover the blood. We spoke about this already, but not a behema. A domesticated animal that you shecht, you don't have to cover the blood. But a chayav off, you have to cover the blood. So Beis Shamai omer miachbar b'deker v'chase. You can use a spade and cover it up. Beis Hillel omer lo yishchor elim ken hayalo afar muchan mibod yom. Beis Hillel says you're not allowed to shech that unless you already had dirt already dug up, prepared to cover the blood on Yantif. Now we said that Beis Shamai agrees you're not allowed to use the spade on Yantif, but it's a case where you had the spade stuck in before Yantif already, and it was going to be soft, crumbly, already crumbled dirt that you're not going to have to crumble it. But in regard to shechting a chayan oaf, now this case of the dovecotes is also an oaf, it's also a bird, but Beis Shamai. But on the Mishnah, Beis Shamai is more lenient. Make sure that you're able to shecht fresh meat or fresh bird on Yantif. So why is Beis Shamai more lenient in regard to getting stuff shechted in our Mishnah, the first Mishnah Daf Beis, but in this Mishnah, he doesn't let you move the ladder. Beis Shamai don't let you move the ladder, so that it seems that they're more restrictive. Even though there's Simchas Yantif that we want you to have, you're not allowed to do as much stuff, and it's only muktza, it's not a malacha. So, Rabbi Yochanan Mechlefes Hashita. Rabbi Yochanan says, switch the opinions. So Rashi says that in the Mishnah right here about the birds, we have to flip the opinions. That Beis Shamai is more lenient about moving the ladders in order to get the birds on Yantif, and Beis Hillel is more strict about moving the ladders. That's how Rashi explains it. Tosfos does not like this explanation, but we're going to see there's like four similar questions that we're going to ask. So Rabbeinu Tam holds that we have to change the two opinions on the first Mishnah on Daf Beis, that that Beis Hillel is much more lenient in the very first Mishnah about if you have the spade already in the dirt before Yantif and it's crumbly dirt, then you could use that on then you could shaft a bird or a chaya on Yantif. That's how Rabbeinu Tam says. And with that, he says that all the discussions we had about can it be dug in, or can you put it in on Yantif? And we said you can't. You'd have the spade already inserted before Yantif. Toso says it makes this makes more sense because why would the Gemara expend so much energy according to Beis Shamai when we know we don't pass them like Beis Shamai? But now that the first Mishnah we have to switch Beis Shamai Beis Hillel, that makes more sense. And the Rosh has so according to Tosos we have to switch the opinion of Beis Shamai Beis Hillel in our first Mishnah on that base. And the Rosh has a slightly different opinion. The Rosh says, right now, just quickly.
Does it happen very often?
What? No, not that once in a while the Gemara will say that from a certain contradiction, but that's more often in a brisa that we'd switch the opinions in a brisa to fix a Mishnah.
Something to stop.
Here we have two Mishnayos, and now we have to teach one of the Mishnayos. So that is not so common. But obviously happens sometimes. But yeah, it's also the fact that there's a machlokas you're showing them about which thing we're changing. That's not as uncommon because the Gemara just says switch it. It doesn't say which one you switch. So they're arguing about which one you switch. The Gemara doesn't say which one to switch. So the Rosh's opinion is so he says that muchlafes usually means to switch. I mean, lahachlif is to switch, and I think chalipin, you exchange when you make a kinyan, you're exchanging a handkerchief or a kli, whatever. So he's saying that Beis Hillel, even though in the first Mishnah Beis Hillel was originally more strict and restrictive of what you could do on Yantif to have the fresh meat, but then in these other cases, Beis Hillel became more lenient. So it's true, it's not consistent, but Beis Hillel changed their opinion. So according to the Rosh, it ends up being nice because all the Mishnayos we get to keep the tags, and it's Beis Hillel. So Beis Hillel was a little bit logically inconsistent, but we know that they changed their viewpoint, and that would explain the difference. So those are three opinions of what Muchlafes Hashita. Mimai. Why do we say we have to change the opinions in our Mishnah that we had Beis Shamai Beis Hillel in the wrong place? Dilma ad kan lo kamri Beis Shamai hasam. Maybe Beis Shamai only said there on the first Mishnah on that base that halahecha deika deker notes because you already had a spade in the ground, so therefore there was nothing to prohibit. About hecha deleka deker notes low, but if there would be no spade in the ground already, Beis Shamai does not allow you to shecht the bird on Yantif. And so this case, when the ladder's not in the right place, they don't let you move it. There's no inconsistency there. Okay, then don't eat it. The inami, and also you could say ad kan lo kamri. Okay. Ad kan lo kamri Beis Hillel hacha. You need the water, it's over there. The bracha. Baruch. Lo kamri Beis Hillel hacha ela deshavcha mochiach alav. Here, Beis Hillel, when you want to move the ladder to go to a different dovecote, Beis Hillel is only lenient because people see you're moving a ladder, but they see you have a dovecote over here, you have a dovecote over there. They know that you're not going to work on your roof. You're only going to get a bird or birds to shacht for Yantif. Aval hasam lo, but in the case of when you want to okay. So when in the first Mishnah you want to shacht a bird or a chaya, you're not allowed to shacht it unless you have loose earth already assembled for it. So there's no contradiction between the cases. Okay, Ela ikasha hakashia, but if you want to ask that there's an inconsistency between Beis Shamai and Beis Hillel, excuse me, inconsistency within Beis Shamai being strict or not being strict, and Beis Hillel being lenient, not being lenient. Ask from a different Mishnah, a Mishnah that's coming up soon on the next Amud. Beis Shamai omrim lo yitel elim kenyanam mibod yom. You're not allowed to take birds, even if you had the ladder up there from before Yantif. You're not allowed to take a bird out of the dovecote unless you felt it. Neneh really means you shook it, but I mean you touched it and you felt it and you want to take this bird. And if you didn't take that one before, you didn't touch it before Yantif, then it's muktza. You can't go up and take it on Yantif, even if the ladder is there before, because it's muktza. Beis Hillel says you could just stand near there and say, well, I don't know if it's even near there, but say, I'm going to take the birds from over there. You don't actually have to touch it. So it has to be that these birds are so young they don't fly away yet, because there's Gemaras in other places, such as the second parak of Baba Basra, where if you had a dovecote, but the thing is that the birds fly in and out of there. So maybe it's a different bird. It's not your bird. A different bird came in there. Maybe the bird that you had went out. So there's a lot of, it wouldn't, so if you actually had to touch it, if it was a bird that could fly away, there's absolutely no way of knowing that it's the same bird anymore. So we have to be talking about a case where the birds are quite young and aren't going to fly away yet. So from that case, Beis Shamai is pretty strict. You have to literally touch the bird and say, I'm taking this bird right now. And maybe you're going to touch another one and you're not going to like it, to shut it, too skinny, whatever. So you don't want that one. So you actually have to, so they're more strict in the prerequisites of what you could shech on Yantif based on what you did before Yantif to make it designated and not muktza. Alma Gabi Simchas YT Beis Shamai L'chumra Beis Hillel Kula. So from that, it seems that Beis Shamai is more strict in regard to Simchas Yantif. You have to jump through more hoops, figuratively, in order to be able to shech that bird for Yantif. For a minhi, but I'll ask a contradiction. Hashochet chayav ha'of b'yom tov. The first Mishnah on Dav Beis. Beis Shamai allows you to shech it if you had a spade already inserted in the ground, and Beis Hillel says you're not allowed to shech the bird or animal or the chaya on Yantif unless you already had a dirt that was already separated for you to pour on top of the blood. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan Muchlefes Hashita. So Rabbi Yochanan says, switch the opinions of Beis Shamai and Beis Hillel. So again, Rashi would say in that Mishnah about touching the birds, and Rabbi Nutam would say it's the Mishnah on Dav Beis, and the Rosh says that Beis Hillel originally on Dav Beis was more strict, but then they became more lenient. Vidilma lohi, but maybe we don't need to come on to Rabbi Yochanan's answer of switching opinions, because ad kan lo amri Beis Shamai ela hecha deika deker notes. On Daf Beis Beis Shamai were lenient because you already had the spade in the ground. As we turn to Yud Aleph, aval hecha deleka deker notes low. But if you didn't have on Daf Beis, you didn't have the spade in, they're not specifically lenient about shechting on Yantif. So they're not specifically strict. I mean, they're not specifically lenient in that case because you had that. They're lenient, but otherwise they're not necessarily lenient. Inami, and also for Beis Hillel, how come Beis Hillel is more strict on Dav Beis and more lenient here? Ad kan lo kamer Beis Hillel hacha lo kevin de mukzahu ba'omed zeh zevni notel sagi. Here, you have to, when you're choosing your birds before Yantif, the only problem is muktza. So by standing and saying, I'm going to take this and that bird, that makes it no longer muktza. Aval hasam lo, but on Dav Beis, it's more complicated than just the designation problem that we mentioned. There's several melachos that you could potentially violate by getting dirt to cover the blood of the shechted behema, the shechted chaya or bird. If you want to ask this contradiction between Beis Shamai and Beis Hillel, ask from a different Mishnah. And this Mishnah now is on Daf Yud Aleph. Beis Shamai omrim ein not l'nesa eli l'katzav alav basa. So an eli is a certain type. Beis Shamai says it's a pestle. Now, if I'm don't have my things mixed up, normally you have a mortar and a pestle. The pestle is usually like a ball, and the mortar is like a peg that's thick, and you crush things in it. Rashi explains this a little different. Rashi says it's a thick board and heavy, and you crush wheat on it to make grits. We learned a long time ago in Brachos about is a grit because a raw kernel is only hadama, and it has to be processed to a certain extent in order to make a wheat kernel mizonos. And so there were different opinions. It has to be cut in two, it has to be cut in three, it has to be cut in four, or it has to be cut in six. And they call those grits. So because you're separating or breaking up these kernels, that's a malacha. So this is a kli shemalachto le'isr. It's a kli that's used for malacha purposes, and therefore it's muktza. You can move it. So Rashi says you wouldn't. So Rashi says that Beis Shamai hold because it's kli shemalachto le'isr, you're not allowed to move it, even if you need it to do something else on it. You're using it as a charcuterie board. You want to spread out your pickles and meat and olives on it, which is so Beis Shammai would say you're not allowed to do this. Well, why they call it a pestle? Well, we'll see in a moment why. Why there's one reason why I understand why Art School calls it a pestle, but it doesn't fit in with Rashi. But Beis Hillel Matirin, Beis Hillel allows you. Oh, so in this case, you're not using a charcuterie board. I just have to use the Gemara itself. You want to chop some meat. So you need this nice thick board to chop the meat. So Beis Shammai says, no, it's a kli shemalachto le'isr, you're not allowed to do. Beis Hillel Matirin, Beis Hillel allows it. Alma gabi Simchas YT, Beis Shammai l'chumra, Beis Hillel l'kula. So here's the thing. So if you're chopping wood, I would think you need something flat. You wouldn't want a bowl that you would chop, that you would use like a mortar and pestle. So I don't understand why Art Scroll says that it's a pestle.
My mother and grandmother used it to make chopped liver.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now they use a grinder also.
But here it's concept you're chopping meat. You wouldn't be grinding it to make or chopping it to make chopped liver. I don't think it's not the same type of katza. You know, you shechted animal, so you're chopping it, you're cutting off the different pieces in order to make it more manageable pieces. You're not grinding it up or chopping it up into smaller pieces. Now, the only reason why I think the Art School might make a little bit of sense is that if it's literally a flat board, it may not have a status of a kli, a vessel. Usually to be a kli, it has to be able to contain something. So the mortar, so the pestle is a ball so that it would contain something. A flat board isn't necessarily a kli, but that's something we'd have to work out. But I don't see how the Art Scroll, what their translation fits with Rashi. Minhi, that's a contradiction. So there, Beis Shammai says you can't use it, even though you need to cut the meat in order to cook it or whatever for Yantif. You can't use this board. Minhi, but that's a contradiction from our first Mishnah. And Beis Hashochet Chayav Ha'ov Beis Shammai. If you want to shech the chaya or an oaf on Yantif, Beis Shammai says if you have the spade in the ground, you're allowed to shech it. So for that, they're more lenient. So how come Beis Shammai is lenient for Simchas Yantif there and strict here? Rabbi Yochanan Mechlefes Hashita. Again, Rabbi Yochanan says switch Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. And we had the three opinions of which one we're changing. So Mimai, but the Gemara says no, we don't have to change it. What's forcing you to say that you have to change the Beis Shammai Beis Hillel? Dilma Lohi. Maybe there's no contradiction. Again, it's the same logic again and again and again. Beis Shammai was lenient on Dav Beis because you already had the spade in the ground. But if not, they wouldn't be particularly lenient. But if you didn't have it already in the ground, they wouldn't allow you to shach. Inami ad kan lo kamer Beis Hillel hacha. Beis Hillel isn't lenient here by using this board or pestle el deika Taurus kli alav because it has a status of a kli. So this is from this line, the article says makes sense, but from what Rashi says, I don't understand it making sense. The Rashi's position is daf of a kaved. A daf is pretty much a flat surface. The problem is it's hard to say that a daf is a kli. I understand what the question they have in Rashi, but you have to explain the Rashi. You can't change what Rashi says. Eldikas Taurus Kli Alav, because it has a status of Kli. So Rashi says because it's a Kli, even though it's usually used for malacha purposes, you're allowed to move it when you need it. When you need it itself. Aval hasam lo, but I guess he's saying it's only a midrabanan. But in the case of on Dav Beis about getting dirt to cover up the blood, that's a diraisa. Well, they obviously can't undo a diraisa. Now the fourth one, kasha hakasha. If you want to ask this contradiction on Beis Shamai and on Beis Hillel, ask from the following case. A Mishna on the next daf says, Beis Shamai omer ein nosnes or lifnei hadorsa. You can't put, so if you shechted an animal on Yantif, what do you have to do in order to eat it? You have to separate the meat from the hide. So, and then what do you do when you have the hide? You put it on the ground where people will walk on it, because in order to be able to use the hide, it has to start getting softened up a little bit, and it'll get softened up by people walking on it. Is that good? You're not allowed to pick it up unless it has at least one olive's worth of meat on it, because otherwise it's muktza. Because what else? You can't do anything constructive on yantif with this hide of the animal. But if there's meat on it, you could still take that meat off to eat the meat. But Beis Hillel allows you to either just put the hide in a place where people are going to walk on it, and you're also allowed to move it even if it doesn't have a kazayas meat on it. So what we say in regard to Simchas YT, Beis Shamai is strict, Beis Hillel is lenient. Or a minhi, unless a contradiction from our Mishna Daf Beis, that if you shecht wild animal or bird on Yantif, Beis Shamai allows you to cover the dirt with the dirt from the spade. So Rashi says that Beis Hillel is lenient to put the hide down where people are going to walk. It's because of Simchas Yantif. If it wouldn't be for Simchas Yantif, if we wouldn't allow you to do this, you wouldn't even shecht it, because I guess part of shechting the animal obviously is for the meat, but once you're shechting the animal, you also want to be able to benefit from the hide, make leather if it's a behema or whatever. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan says Mechlefet Hashita. Switch the opinions of Beis Shamai Beis Hillel. Mimai, now we're on 10a2. Mimai, why do we have to say we have to change the opinions? Dumalohi, maybe there's no need to change the opinions. Akan lo kamri Beis Shamai hasam alahecha dika deker notes. Deker notes low. Beis Shamai is only lenient on Dav Beis because you already have the spade in the ground. But in general, they're not particularly lenient because of Simchas Yantif. Inami adkan lokamri Beis Hillel hacha ela dechazi lemigza iluya. But also, Beis Hillel is lenient here for you to put the hide down the ground is because people used to sit on the ground to eat. He brings a Gemara from Arvei Psachim Rashi. So, meaning they didn't have chairs, they would eat on the floor. So to have a hide on the floor makes it much more, much nicer way to eat your meal, that you're on a hide instead of just eating on the dirt, sitting on the dirt, or crouching on the dirt, or leaning on the dirt. Aval Hasam. So there's a constructive purpose to move it, to carry it, because you could put it where you're, in your dining room. Aval Hasam lo, but on Dav Beis about getting some dirt to cover the blood, there's no constructive purpose for that, so they are not, so they don't allow it there. So if you want to ask such a contradiction between Beis Shamai's apparent leniency and later stringency, and Beis Hillel's apparent initial stringency and later leniency, hakasha, ask the following: Beis Shamai omer mein misalkinas hatresin b'yomtov. So just like nowadays in New York and even on places like Devon, the stores, they have some type of metal over the doors. in New York, they have like they expand, and then it's like a mesh type thing, so people can't break in and break the windows and stuff like that. So just like they had that, I mean, it's true in the old city, even especially in the Muslim quarter, the shopkeepers they it's locked up and there's metal in front of it. So they used to have a metal covering up the shops when the shops were closed. So what if you wanted to take that metal piece off and you wanted to use it as a tray to put food or whatever on Yontif? So Beis Shamai does not allow you to take it down and use it. So matir and aflahaser. Beis Hillel doesn't just allow you to take it from the store and use it as a tray. You're allowed to put it back at the store when you're done. Alma gabi Simchas YT Beis Shamai l'chum Beis Hillel kula. So it seems in regard to Simchas YT, it's going to help, it's going to enhance your Yontif if you could use this tray. But Beis Shamai says no, we don't allow you to use it. Or minhu, so that's a contradiction from the first Mishnah. Hashochet chayva opium tov. The Beis Shamai is lenient for you to shaft the bird or the chaya when you have the spade in the ground already, and Beis Hillel isn't so lenient. So Beis Shamai lo kasha. It's not a contradiction against Beis Shamai because Hasam the Ikadeker notes there you already have the spade in the ground, so it's easy to get the dirt. They didn't prohibit anything. Hachaleka Decker notes, but in this case, there's no analogous case of something already halfway prepared. Ela Beis Hillel kasha, but Beis Hillel allowing you to use it there and even put it back contradicts Beis Hillel's stringency on Dav Beis that you're not allowed to shaft unless you had the dirt already prepared before Yontif to cover the blood. So in regard to that Beis Hillel question, I'm Rabbi Yochanan Muklefes Hashita. So for that contradiction, we have no other recourse but to say Muklefes Hashita. Inami, or you could answer it without saying Muklefes Hashita. Ad kan lo kamer Beis Hillel hacha. Beis Hillel only is lenient here in regard to this metal that they used to cover the store entrance with. Elam mishum de'ein binyan bekalim. There is no, so even though there's a malach of binyan, when you use a kli, you can't do binyan with something that's a kli. They ain't steer bekalim, and there's no dismantling of something on Yantif. So because this metal thing doesn't seem to be just plain flat, but it seems to have the status of a kli, the fact that you're taking it apart doesn't mean that it doesn't fall under the category of stira, of dismantling construction, and putting it back doesn't involve construction. So there's no reason for them to prohibit it. Aval hasam lo. But in the case of digging some dirt to cover the blood, there's no other heter that they find that would allow you to do that. Okay. New Mishnah. So we saw this because we just asked a question from it 5 questions ago. Mishnah. Beis Shamai omrim lo yita elam kenan bi bodium. You can't take a bird out of the dovecote unless you felt it and before Yantif. Otherwise, it's muktza. Beis Hillel omrim omed v'omer zev zeh ani notel. You're able to stand and say, I'm going to take this and that bird before Yantif started. So it's no longer muktza. We're on 10a3. Gemara. Amrav Chanabarami Machlokas Bebrecha Rishona. So Rashi says that these types of birds, whatever they were, whether they were literally doves, which Rashi seems to say that they were doves, doves would give birth to a boy and girl chick, whatever they call it, every month for, I don't know, 7-8 months of the year. But the first brood of the year, they would keep it with the mother the whole year, whether to help the mother or the mother needed to boss someone around. But the not first brood of the spring, as long as it wasn't the first, they would take those. So the machlokes is only if it's that first brood. The Beis Shamai sabri gezrina dilma asi leimluche. Beis Shamai says we make a gzera that you're not allowed to use it unless you actually touched it, because maybe you're going to change your mind if you didn't actually touch it. Beis Hillel savri lo gazrinan. And Beis Hillel says we don't have to be strict and make a gzera that you have to actually feel it before Yantiv. Okay. But in the second or subsequent broods, Beis Shammai agree that you're able to, you don't actually have to feed it, to feel it. So just Lamaisa, it would seem that maybe this is talking about Pesach, because the Pesach would probably be the first brood of the season. Sukkot wouldn't be. Or, yeah, so Beis Hillel, according to Beis Hillel, why do you need to say I'm taking this bird and that bird? Just say from this dovecot I'm going to take a bird tomorrow. Why do you have to seem to specify I'm going to take this bird and that bird? And if you say Beis Hillel doesn't have the opinion, doesn't hold to the concept of breira. Now I briefly mentioned breira, probably was last week, where we spoke about chalas chutz. So breira means I have a certain thing. Can I retroactively later on say retroactively this part was that? So in regard to the chalas chutz, some achronim say that when it's chalas chutz, because it's only rabbinic, we could be lenient and say that if it's diraisa in Eretz Yisrael, you need to take the challah right away, because it needs to be taken out. We can't retroactively say this part ended up being challah all the way from the beginning. But for a dough that you make in chutz aretz, you can bake the dough and eat the bread or whatever it is, and leave a little bit over at the end and take challah from that. And we're saying that now at the end, we could say breira, that retroactively I'm saying the part that was challah is this part that I'm holding right now. So the part that I ate before was not the part of challah. That's basically how breira works. Does that make sense? So with these birds, can I say I'm going to take one of those birds? So, but there's 6 birds in there. Does it matter which one of the 6 I take? If we say breira, I say I'm going to take one of those birds. I'm going to take from these birds. And tomorrow, when you take 2 of the birds, so we say that the birds that you designated before Yantif were the ones that you took. If you don't say breira, we would say you need to say this bird and this bird specifically, and then those are the ones you take the next day. That's what the idea of breira is. So if you want to say that the reason Beis Hillel doesn't makes you say I'm taking this bird and that bird is because they don't hold breira, we're going to show you a different Mishna where Beis Hillel does use the concept of breira. That at the beginning you didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but later on, when you make your decision later, it shows that retroactively, this decision you did now makes retroactively that was the decision you were going to make the whole time. So the case is something which for us is not so lamaisa. Unfortunately, it is a little bit lamaisa. It happens sometimes, and if someone is very sick at a Pesach hotel, or if someone unexpectedly dies at the Pesach hotel, you have Kohanim there. I was just reading somewhere. Yeah, it was in the last 2 weeks reading somewhere where someone was young. Now he became a rabbi later, but he was young and he was like a waiter, and someone died, and they needed a rabbi to tell the Kohanim where they could go or where they couldn't go. So that's the case that we're going to have over here. But we learned in a Mishnah, Hameis b'bayis v'lo psachim harbe. If there's a dead body in a house and it has many doorways, so anything under the roof will become tame because of tumas ohel. The ohel, the roof, the covering will transmit the tuma of the dead body to anything under that roof. When you go through a doorway, though, the doorway, so Rashi says they're either all open right now or all closed right now. So I guess the doorway, because it has a lintel and a cross beam, whatever, that's not necessarily the same. That's not the same ceiling as the ceiling of the house. So if you have, let's say, for whatever reason, you had a bowl underneath the doorway, that wouldn't become tummy because it wasn't under this roof. But if you would take the body out of that door, when it goes through that door, then the cross beam over the top will be the ohel and make the tuma go underneath everything under that cross beam. So here, because let's say there's so many doors, if you don't use that doorway, that bowl isn't going to become tummy. But the question is, which door is going to be the door that will become tummy? So kulam tmeim. So right now, if there's let's say a bowl or something under all the different in all the different doorways, they are all tame because we expect that the mace will be taken out of that doorway and it'll become tame then. But niftach achad mehem. But when one of the doors was open, so once that door's open, we're going to take the body out that way. Hu tamei v'kulan tahorin. The stuff underneath that doorway is tamei, but the kalim underneath all the other doorways are tahorim. Because the tuma didn't go under those doorways. So if you didn't take the body out yet, but you decided that you were going to take it out of a specific door, or you were going to take it out of a big window that was 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim wide, but smaller than that wouldn't have the status, or wouldn't be physically big enough, Rashi says, to use. Matzalas al kol hapsachim kulo. That saves all the other doorways. When we say saves, it means it saves them from making the stuff underneath them become tameh. Now, he said it publicly, so I'll say it. David Jacobson, when his mother passed away, I think she was at the Lieberman, he didn't want to take her out the back door, which is the normal freight entrance and exit, but they also take the garbage that way. He didn't want to do that for his mother. And so he was able to take her out the front door. So a case like that, I would think someone like him who has some authority to do stuff like that, that would be a case of chishev lotzia. But that case might be a little different because normally the derech, it's assumed it would go out the back. But I'm just trying to give you an example where a chishev might, in a real life scenario, where that might when he went in there to get his mother out, he knew that he wasn't going to take her out the freight exit. Beis Shamai Omer v'hu shachishav lotzio ad shelo yamos hameis. The fact that you decided that you were going to take it out, that's if you were going to use that doorway before the person died. Beis Hillel omrim af mishemos hameis. And Beis Hillel says, no, your decision can work even if you only decided after the person died which door you were going to go out. And at this point, we're assuming that the reason that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing is Beis Shammai rejects the idea of breira. When I decide which door I'm going to use out, that retroactively shows that there's not going to be any tuma under the other doorways, and Beis Shammai holds that there's no breira, so we don't know that this one's going to be okay, so they're tameh, and Beis Hillel holds a breira. And Rashi points out that these are talking about kalim that are in the doorways already at the time after the person died, but before you made your decision of which door to use. So we know Beis Hillel agrees with breira. So the specific question we're asking is, why did our Mishna say Beis Hillel says Omed v'Omer zev is any notel? Beis Hillel says in order to designate a bird that you're going to use take tomorrow on the day of Yantiv Teshach is because you're taking this bird and this bird. Why don't we say I'm going to take from there, and whichever bird you take, it'll be okay because of the concept of brera. And we know from this case of tuma, so that Beis Hillel agrees with the concept of brera. So why don't we just let them use brera? So the Gemara says, Hayit Mar Allah, it was taught about that Mishna, Amar Rabba, Rabba says, when Beis Hillel says, when you decide which door you're going to go out at, that's only going to save something from now into the future from something becoming. You made another mess. You did it last week, and I did it again today. Okay, trying to pick it up, please, and put it on the plate. Okay. Okay, please go down under there and clean it up. Yeah.
You can't put those things on. They have to be in the bag.
So put them in the bag. Gave you the plate to put on. You spilled it. It's spilled by accident, but I didn't spill it. But now that it's a mess, we have to clean it up. Okay. Fine. No, I can't help you right now. V'chein Amar Rabbi Oshi, and Rav Oshi also gave the same answer as Rabba. The Taras of Sachmi Kanal Haba, that's only going to help that underneath the doors from the time you made the decision and later it won't become Tameh. But Kanal Haba in the Mafreya Lo. That means that only from now in the future, but retroactively, no. So let's say that it's like a room service. So if they put something in the doorway after you made your decision, then because that doorway you're not going to use, that cup isn't going to be tameh. But if the cup was in the doorway before you made your decision, that's already tameh, and we're not retroactively going to say that bowl or that coffee mug is not going to be tameh. No, if it was in there before, it's already there. So brera doesn't help here. It is they Beis Shamai, so neither of them use brera in this case. Rava Amar, and Rava said, Liolam Lamafreya, we could say that even once you make your decision which doorway you're going to go out, that even helps retroactively for the kalim that were already in the other doorways. We're going to say those kalim are not going to become tameh. And here, in this case, the reason that Beis Hillel is lenient, that Beis Hillel needs you to say a specific bird that you're going to take is Dilma Metalta V'Shavik. Maybe on Yantif, you're going to take one and say, oh, I don't like this. Then you're going to go pick up a different one and like that. The Kamatal Talmidi Dil Chazile. And because the first one that you take, you're not going to like, so brera would work. But when this is showing that you don't want this, you didn't want to take that particular bird. So when you touch that bird to take it down, you were touching muktza. So that was a problem. So therefore, you have to say, I'm taking a specific bird, because if you don't take that specific bird, or if you were to not take the first bird that you touched, it ends up that you're touching muktza. But Beis Hillel says, if I take this and that one, that's enough. You didn't touch it. Maybe by the time you actually touch it, go up on the ladder tomorrow and touch it, you're not going to like it. So how would your oral designation be sufficient to make it not muktza anymore? So the Gemara says, Hani milim erev yom tov. That's because you said which bird you were going to take on erev yantif. So by the next day, you're not going to change your mind. If yom tov asr. But if you would wait till yantif itself to decide which specific ones to take, that's not okay. There's maybe something that originally you thought was a nice fatty one is going to be a skinny one, which you're not going to want to chef. Become a tal talmidi dil chazile, and you're going to touch one that you don't want to use, and then it means when you picked it up, you were picking up muktza. Inami, or another answer, zimnin de mishkach kulu klushin. Maybe they're all going to be skinny, v'shavak lahu, and you're going to leave them all v'asiglis mnuim b'simchas yantif, and then you're going to not have any simchas yantif because you're not going to have anything to shech. So in order that situation doesn't happen, Beis Hillel wants you to go up and take a look and designate so that you will have something to eat on Yantif fresh for Yantif. Okay, next Mishnah. Zman zimein shchorem umatzalavenim. If you designated black birds before Yantif, and when you went up to pick them out, there were only white ones. Levanim umatzashchorim, or white ones, and then when you went in there the next day, there were only black ones. Shnaim u'matzah shlosha. There were 2 in there before Yantif when you designated them, and now there's 3. Asurim, you're not allowed to use those birds because they're clearly not the birds are not the ones that you designated beforehand, and these are muktza birds. Shlosha matzah shnayim mutar. But if you found 3 and now there's only 2, you're allowed to use them because we're just going to assume that 1 flew away. So if there was 2 and then there's 3 that another one came, well, you can't tell the difference which 2 were the ones that you designated yesterday. But if there were 3 and now there's only 2, we'll say that that these 2 are of the 3 that you already designated yesterday, and 1 flew away. And Rashi points out we don't say that all 3 left, and these are 2 completely different birds. If you designated birds that were inside the nest or with the specific pigeonhole, but then you found them outside of it, because I guess there's a little like a motel, there's a door, but then there's a walkway in front of it. So the same thing with these dovecotes. There was space for them to be inside the nest part, and some place for them to be in front of it. If they were inside and now they're in front of it, assume you're not allowed to take those on Yantif. And they're talking about it. Rashi says we're talking about a case where there's nothing inside that hole into the pigeonhole anymore. The Gemara will explain why. But if there's no birds except these ones on the ledge, we say that those are the ones that were inside. Gemara Pshita. So the Mishna's case is obvious. If you designated a white one and now it's black, it's clearly not the same one. So Amar Rabba, it's a case where you said some of them were black and some of them were white, and you designated some of them for Yantif, and some white ones for Yantif, some black ones for Yantif. But then the next day, the black birds were in the place where the white ones were yesterday, and the white ones are where the black ones were yesterday. Even though you might want to say they just decided to move and switch pigeonholes overnight, Kamash Malan. So the Mishna is telling us that Hanach Azdula Alma Vahani Azrinachu. The other ones went away somewhere, and these the white ones that were in this particular pigeonhole left, and the ones that are black now are completely different ones. So the ones that are in there now are muktza ones. You didn't designate them before yet. Lema Masela Rab Chanina. And why don't we say that this this works in accordance to the opinion of Rab Chanina, Dam Rab Chanina, Rov Akarav Halech Achar Rov. So this is actually, the Gemara talks about this in the second parak above Beitza that I mentioned. Yeah, Dav Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph. That if there's a majority case and some things are closer, Halech Achar Rov, we follow the majority. So I think the Gemara, the case in the Gemara over there started out from the case of a Shaila of Egla Rufa. So if there's an unknown corpse that's murdered, and we have to measure and say, so what if the closer city has 100 people in it, and in the other direction it's a little further away, but there's 10,000 people in it. So what's the more likelihood that the murderer would have come from, the bigger city or the smaller city? The bigger city. That's a rove. So in that case, when we have a contradiction between the rove, the majority likely case, or the karov, which is the more closer thing, how would we paskin? Rabbi Chanina says we would follow the rove. So most of the birds aren't from your dovecote. So when you find them, they probably came from somewhere else. When you found the birds were both displaced, not from where you saw them the night before, we assume that the more likely explanation is that they're a different bird, even though the white and the black were closest to each other. But it makes more sense to say that that a bird came from somewhere else and now went into this pigeonhole, and the ones that were there left. Amar Abaye, so it says no, we don't have to follow Rab Chanina. It could be like the way Abaye explained, but daf. it's a case where there's a little ledge in front of it. So other birds come by to use it. They loiter over there. It's the lahavdil, the highway oasis, the tollway oasis. So this is when the birds are flying away, they take a break on the ledge over there. Hachanami bedaf. So this must be a case where we have a dovecote with the ledge. So other birds are likely to go there. If there's no ledge, a strange bird isn't so likely to come and move in there. But because there's a ledge there, and so all the birds know there, and the birds stop for a rest on the ledge, we would assume that the birds came from somewhere else. It has nothing to do with what to do when you have a rove on one hand and a karov on the other. Okay. Few more minutes. If you had two birds that you designated and now you found three, you're not allowed to use them. So the Gemara says, well, what's the big because whichever way you look at it, it's not okay. If all three are different, then you clearly didn't designate any of them. And if they're not different, but there's definitely at least one that you didn't designate that's mixed up, and there's no way for you to know which one they are, so they're not okay. I guess there is a case if you had two white ones and now there's three, but there's a black one, you know you didn't do the black one. In that case, would we allow you to use it? So you'd have to look what they're showing them if they talk about a case like that. Okay, Shnayim umatz shlosha. If there were three and then you found two, there were three there before Yantif that you designated, and now there's only two, you're allowed to use those. My time, what's the reason? Hani inuninu. We're saying they're the same ones that were there before. And one of them flew away. So let's say that the author of a Mishna is Rabbi, and it's not the Chacham man. The Tanya, because we learned in the Beitza, Hiniach mana umatza masayim chulim ma'aser shenim uravim zebazeh divrei Rabbi. So if you put a certain amount of ma'aser sheni has to be in Yerushalayim. But if it's too hard to schlep the food to Yerushalayim, you can redeem it onto a minted coin, and the coin now has a kedusha, and you're going to take the coin up to Yerushalayim and buy food in Yerushalayim. So if you put this Ma'aser Sheni in a certain place, this is your Ma'aser Sheni box, and now you found two coins in there, or you had $10, 10 $1 bills in there, and now there's 20 $1 bills in there. What's going on? So regular money got mixed up with this Ma'aser Sheni money. And the Ma'aser Sheni money has kedusha and it's transferable, and the chulin doesn't. This is what Rabbi says. But the Chachamim say it's all regular money. And we say none of it has the kedusha of Ma'aser Sheni. So Rashi says, to explain Rebbe's opinion, that when we say that Ma'aser Sheni, holy money, and the regular are mixed up together, so one of them is chulin. We don't know which one it is. You take the best coin and say, if this is the Ma'aser Sheni coin, then this is the Ma'aser Sheni coin. And if this is the regular coin, let me transfer the kedusha from the other coin onto this coin. That's what Rebbe holds to. And according to the Chachamim, it's all regular. Because you wouldn't mix regular money with Ma'aser Sheni money. So this must be not the Ma'aser Sheni money. If you left 200, I don't know if any of you are thinking of a certain halacha when we've been reading through these Gemaras, but there's a if you put out 10 pieces of chametz for your bedika and then you only found 9, what do you do? If you put out 10 and you found 11, so that's also a case where. So the Gemara isn't talking about that, but probably because that's all derabanan. Well, because b'diraisa you be mevavta your chametz, but the chamim say you have to do bedika. But if you know that you had 200, penny or whatever, 200 coins or the value or a bigger coin that was worth a big amount in their Meiser Sheni box, and now you only have a smaller amount in there. Mana muna chumana muta. So we say that you took something out of the box, and the other money that's in there is still part of that Meiser Sheni money. Divrei Rabbi, these are words of Rabbi. Chachamim omrim hakol chulin, and the Chachamim say that it's all chulin. So in our Mishnah we had either 2 and then you found 3. We said you're not allowed to use those. Or you had 3 and then you found 2. We said you're allowed to use it. So that seems to follow the logic of Rabbi in this case. According to the Chachamim, it doesn't fit with the logic of the Chachamim. So that's why our Gemara tried to say that this Mishnah would follow the opinion of Rabbi. So the Gemara says no. Filu Timur Rabbana. Even if you found out, you could say that our Mishnah is the Chachamim. Hayid Marallah, because we learned about our Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan about the birds. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, Dami Travai. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar both say Shani gozlos havasun lerados. Young birds are different because they move around a lot. So it wouldn't make Lahavdil, the book, Are You My Mother? The little bird, one of the little birdies is going to explore. So, okay, 2 more minutes. So it's likely to say that one bird went away. It's not it's not analogous to the case of the money. The money doesn't walk away. The money doesn't have legs. Young birds have legs, and they're likely to start exploring. Belema li lishnoy Allah. So why did Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar have to explain it that way? Shani gozos havasus lerados. Did I skip a line? I think so. Why did they have to say that young birds tend to move around? Va'idmar Allah dehahi. But this statement was about the machlokas of Rabbi and Chachamim. To Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar, Chad Amar b'shnei kisin machlokas. One of them said, we don't know which one Rabbi Yochanan said and which one Rabbi Lazar said, but one of them said that the machlokas is when you had 2 different pouches that had money for the Meiser Sheni. So they were arguing what Rabbi and the Chacham are actually arguing about. If they're both in one literal purse, even in one pouch, even Rabbi agrees that when there's more money, that when there's less money was originally there, we say that it's not Meiser Sheni money, it's regular money. V'chad Amar, and the other one said, B'kis echad machlokas, and machlokas between Rabbi and Chachamim is when you only have the money in one pouch. Aval b'shnei kisin divrei kol mana munach u'mana muta. But when they were in 2 pouches, we say you took money out of one and you didn't take the other one, but the money that remains is definitely Meiser Sheni money. Bishlam. Okay. Bishlam alamanda Amar. B'shnei kisin machlokas. Okay, this is gonna go. Okay, let's leave it here because it's gonna have to go on for a little bit.